everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is Shannon Von Felden with the EveryLife Foundation. We're going to give everyone 30 seconds to log on, and then we'll get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right. Well, I know we have a very busy agenda for today, so I want to get us started. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus Briefing, titled Rare Disease Therapy Development, Existing Challenges and Proposed Innovative Solutions. We do have closed captioning available on the webinar. You can hit the transcription button at the bottom of your screen. We also have Spanish translations. If you go to the chat, there's a link for you to hit there. I wanted to start today thanking our Rare Disease Congressional Caucus co-chairs, Senators Klobuchar and Wicker, and Representatives Butterfield and Bilirakis. We appreciate all of their support and leadership on the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus. And I also want to thank our briefing supporters for this caucus briefing, which starts Rare Disease Week. And so thank you to all of our sponsors, including our presenting sponsor today, Travere. And I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Dr. Ray, a board member of the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases, who will serve as our moderator today.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to the more than 1,000 attendees that we have at this briefing, and give a special thank you to our co-chairs and to particularly Representative Bilirakis for sharing his comments live, and Senator Klobuchar for a video remarks that she is going to offer in a few moments. My name is Dr. Amrit Ray. I am very honored to be a board member of the EveryLife Foundation for Rare Diseases. My other hats are as a physician researcher, and most important, as a rare dad. Thank you for being invited to moderate this discussion. This is an important briefing that comes as an important moment, and it is a moment that is filled with promise. So I would like to share some very brief context for this briefing, and then give you a quick overview of our agenda and introduce you to our esteemed speakers. Let me begin with just talking about the situation. Situation is that there are 30 million Americans with a diagnosed rare disease. Okay. Of the 30, there are more than 93% of them that do not have an FDA-approved therapy available. And the process of developing a therapy, it's a process that's costly, firsthand, a process that takes a long time, on average about 15 years to develop just one therapy. Let me just put that into context. For children that have rare diseases, we're in the situation where 30% of them will not survive to see their 5th birthday. Okay, so the idea of 15 years for them, and I think for all of us, it is unthinkable. Now, that said, we have made a lot of progress over the last decade, and a lot of that progress has led to new innovations, new therapies, new processes. The progress has come about primarily because of patient-focused drug development, and because of the close involvement of many rare disease patient communities to put in place incentives by these communities that really work. It's involved a close partnership between rare disease advocates and between scientists, physicians, between FDA, between Congress, many other legislators, but it's that coming together that has really made a difference. So we do have some momentum, but our work's not done yet. And the reasons are the numbers that I shared beforehand, the 93%, the 15 years, the difficulty for ultra rare diseases of facing the hurdles of very complex trials. And sometimes even when therapies are approved, the serious issues that come with barrier to access. So we have to come together again now. And just as we've done before, this is a great opportunity for rare disease advocates, for everyone at this briefing to come together to really drive an exciting path forward. So today we're going to hear some comments and some remarks from some very esteemed speakers. This is our agenda. In a moment, I will hand over to Eric Dubé to introduce Representative Bilirakis, and then we will hear a video from Senator Klobuchar, followed by 4 speakers. I will introduce them very briefly, but they will go into more in a moment. We will have James Valentine from Hyman Phelps, followed by Isabel Lusada, founder and CEO of the Amyloidosis Research Consortium, followed by Melissa Getz, co-president of Living with FCS. And then finally, we will have Anna Johnson, a board member from the Parent Project for Muscular Dystrophy. We'll have a few moments at the end for questions and answers. So let's make a start. Let me hand over to Mr. Eric Dubé, CEO of Travere, to introduce Representative Bilirakis.
Thank you, Emmett, for that introduction. It's a pleasure to participate in this special event. And much has changed around the world since we last convened in February of 2020. But there is one constant, and that is the passion of the rare disease community. And in fact, it's stronger than ever. For those of you that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Eric Dubé. I'm the CEO of Travere Therapeutics, and we're a biopharmaceutical company exclusively focused on rare disease. And we know that treatment options for rare diseases are urgent, and we share that same urgency because the lives of many of our own employees have been personally touched by rare disease. During this Rare Disease Week last year, we were proud to announce the first ever Rare Disease Diversity Inclusion Fellowship at the Every Life Foundation. And it is gratifying that Rare Disease Week now features diversity roundtable discussions to elevate the voices of families of color living with rare disease. And the work of the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, which we proudly helped to found with Linda Goller-Blount and the Black Women's Health Imperative, has helped to ensure that perspectives of all people living with rare disease are integrated into policymaking, drug development, and regulatory decision-making. This is great progress, but it is only the beginning. Navigating life through COVID-19 has not been easy for any of us, but particularly for families living with rare disease. The pandemic has spurred innovative thinking, such as the use of telehealth, which can save rare families the anxiety and cost of travel to specialists. We work closely with policy members to ensure broader telehealth access and are supporting organizations like Children's National Medical Center to train doctors and patients on how to best leverage telehealth as an important tool. In the regulatory arena, COVID-19 has provided important lessons on how we can conduct clinical trials in new ways to develop potential therapies for the over 6,000 rare conditions without approved treatments. This is our urgent guiding light, and the Every Life Foundation's leadership and introduction of the STAT Act and inclusion of provisions like the FDA Center of Excellence in the draft 21st Century Cures 2.0 legislation and new approaches to newborn screening are all important signs that the rare disease community is being heard. And these are all reasons for optimism, which brings us to today. Rare Disease Week brings us all of these issues together for our leaders in the Rare Disease Caucus, for whom we are so indebted. We are fortunate to hear today from Congressman Bilirakis and Senator Klobuchar, as well as incredible leaders from the rare disease community. I want to thank everyone who is taking the time to participate this week and to ensure that all of those affected by rare disease are being represented. Congratulations on the progress, and while the road ahead of us will test us, we will be walking on that road together. Our first speaker is one of our longest and strongest advocates. He has always been open to hearing about critical issues. And in fact, we recently had many good conversations with his office about rare kidney disorders, which is an urgent and often overlooked problem. He's currently the co-chair of the House Congressional Rare Disease Caucus, serves on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and represents the people of Florida's 12th District. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Gus Bilirakis.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to today's briefing called the Rare Disease Therapy Development existing challenges and propose innovative solutions. I'm honored to be here to participate today. Hopefully next year it'll be face-to-face. But this is a real priority for me for the last 15 years. And I know we've made some progress, but we've got to continue to do so. So again, this is the kickoff of the Rare Disease Week for 2021, and thanks for allowing me to be here. I'm Congressman Gus Bilirakis, as I said, and I have the distinct privilege to serve as a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, now a senior member of the committee, but also on the subcommittee on health, as well as serving as the co-chair of the Rare Disease Caucus here in Congress. For me, this work is very personal because I have close family members and friends who have and continue to suffer with rare diseases. I know the cost, both in financial terms, but also the human toll that battling a rare disease inflicts upon the patient and his or her loved ones. As you all know, rare diseases are not a rare problem, and there are an estimated 7,000 rare diseases which affect more than 30 million Americans. And yet approximately 95% of these conditions have no known treatment or cure, unfortunately. With each rare disease impacting smaller patient populations, there are challenges in getting the research and attention each of these patients deserves. For this reason, I've been a huge proponent of the federal investment in research that can provide hope and potential for cures for many of these rare diseases. I'm proud that the most recent budget we passed includes $42.9 billion for NIH. This figure includes $7 million for congenital heart disease research, $5 million for National Neurological Conditions Surveillance System, and $10 million for the National ALS Registry and Biorepository. Biomedical research saves lives, and I'm glad to see that this critical funding at NIH has and continues to be an issue that brings together members of Congress from across the aisle. These are nonpartisan issues, folks. I was also proud to co-author the Transplant Act with Representative Doris Matsui, which was signed into law earlier this year. The bill reauthorizes the C.W. Bill Young Cell Transplantation Program and the National Cord Blood Inventory. It will help tens of thousands of Americans of all ages who suffer with diseases like rare blood cancers, sickle cell anemia, and other inherited metabolic or immune disorders. This new law provides hope to those who are struggling with life-threatening illnesses. Additionally, I'm particularly proud of the legislation I'm leading with my rare disease co-chair, Representative G.K. Butterfield in the House, and Senators Klobuchar, who will speak to you, I believe, in a few minutes, and Senator Wicker in the Senate. We served together in the House many years ago. But it's called the Speeding Therapy Access Today, or the STAT Act, and it's H.R. 1730, and I know it's a great priority of yours. This bill would enact targeted, impactful, and attainable policy reforms at the FDA to accelerate development of therapies across the spectrum of rare diseases and disorders and facilitate patient access to these therapies. The STAT Act will improve access to therapies for the rare disease community, including patients living with an ultra-rare disease, by promoting better intergovernmental coordination and advancing science-based regulatory policies. This is very exciting, and we've got to get this across the finish line. And again, this is not a new model, so we know it works. It's worked for other other members of our health community. So one of the most exciting aspects of this particular bill is the creation of the Inter-Center Institute on Rare Diseases and conditions within the FDA. The Intercenter Institute model was first authorized, as I said, through the 21st Century Cures Act and used successfully to spur the development of better treatments for cancer. We want to replicate that success for the rare disease community. The STAT Act is aimed at helping rare disease patient populations receive accelerated treatment approvals and increase access to innovative new therapies. As the doctor said earlier, people don't have 15 years to wait. So we've got to continue to make progress, folks. I'm very excited about this legislation. Have been working to help secure additional co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle, and I know you've helped me with this, and I really appreciate so much. I was particularly pleased to see it added, as was mentioned, as a provision to the working draft of the Cures 2.0 legislation that I'm hopeful will be able to receive bipartisan momentum here in the House, as did Cures 1.0. And that was a great success. I also will be looking for other additional legislative vehicles, such as the next year's user fee reauthorization bill, to get this bill across the finish line as one of my top priorities. These are just a couple of the many items we're working on as champions of the rare disease community. It takes us all to get things done. We have to work together as a team. While I would love to be greeting you, as I said, in person, as I hope we will be doing next year, I know we will be, I understand that this virtual experience improves safety for everyone. Of course it does. It is an honor to speak before you today, but also to have the chance to thank you for your advocacy. You're making a real difference. Lawmakers meet with many people each day, but I've found that it is the personal, individual stories that truly make the biggest impact. Sharing the challenges that you and your loved ones face due to the rare diseases can help to garner much needed support for the legislative changes we as a rare disease community are hoping to make. Again, Max, my good friend from New Jersey, comes to see me on a regular basis, but I haven't seen him lately. He's a wonderful, wonderful person. And I guess Liz around 10 years old now, but he's a wonderful guy, and he comes to see us on a regular basis along with his mother. And I hope they're listening right now. It comes to the office, and what a difference they've made. So please bring your family members and friends up to see us and share the personal stories. So I want to thank you for getting outside of your comfort zone and educating your elected officials about how Congress can make a positive difference in the lives of those living with rare diseases. I know you'll do great work. I know this conference will be extremely beneficial. Again, thank you for participating today, and thank you to the RDLA, our partners, for inviting me here today to be with you virtually. I look forward to meeting with you again in person real soon. God bless, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And we also just really appreciate the way in which you not only called out the legislation, 21st Century Cures, PDUFA, STAT Act, all those things, but also talked about the human toll and introduced us to Max. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
With that, we will move over to a video from Senator Klobuchar.
Hello to all of the incredible advocates attending today's Rare Disease Congressional Caucus Briefing. I'm glad to join you by video, and I hope to see you in person very soon. I'd like to thank, first of all, Dr. Amrit Ray for moderating today's event and for all the work you do, Doctor, both as a physician researcher and as the parent of a child with a rare disease. I also want to thank Congressman Gus Bilirakis for joining today and partnering with me on legislation to support people living with a rare disease. And thank you to everyone attending this briefing. You're on the front lines, leading the way, working every day, helping to find therapies, treatments, and cures, an area that, of course, doesn't get the attention it deserves. As you know, there are nearly 7,000 known rare diseases affecting almost 1 in 10 Americans. That's about 30 million people, roughly half of whom are children. But only about 5% of rare diseases have a treatment that has been approved by the FDA. We know these patients. We've met them. We've heard their stories. Recently, I had the honor of talking with Abby Hauser from my home state and heard her story. She's 26 years old and now thriving. She grew up with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome for EDS, a rare genetic connective tissue disorder. For Abby and other Americans with EDS, this means living with chronic pain, frequent bruising, abnormal scarring, joint degeneration, and dislocations. When Abby was 7, she dislocated her knee by simply rolling over. It happened again 2 months later when she laid down with her crayons to color. She's developed stress fractures in her spine from the stress of gravity on her body and survived countless injuries caused by doing simple tasks like holding the door open for a stranger. But that hasn't stopped her from opening doors. She ran and completed the Chicago Marathon. For the past decade, she's been a volunteer counselor at the Muscular Dystrophy Association summer camp. In college, she's been studying and working to make fitness and sports fully inclusive for people with disabilities and chronic illnesses. And like so many of you, she serves as an advocate, expressing her vision of a world in which every rare disease has a viable and effective treatment, a world where research gives everyone a chance to fight no matter how rare their disease. You're all together because you know everyone deserves that chance, and federal funding for this research is essential, especially since so much critical research was stalled due to the coronavirus pandemic. Patients and their friends and families are counting on us to catch up. That's why I've fought to increase support for the NIH and medical research funding. Last year, we included a $1.25 billion boost for NIH, the 6th year in a row the Institute has received an increase. And that's important progress, because before the 21st Century Cures Act was signed into law in 2016, NIH funding was flat for more than a decade. But so much more needs to be done. And since a key theme of today's event is solutions, I wanted to highlight just a few of other efforts that I've taken part in to support people living with a rare disease. Along with Senator Wicker, we chair the Senate Rare Disease Caucus, we led bipartisan legislation like the BENEFIT Act, which gives patients and patient families a better seat at the table when the FDA is reviewing new treatments. And we also led the Speeding Therapy Access Today Act to accelerate development of therapies across the spectrum of rare diseases and help improve patients' access to them. Both of these bills are important steps to making sure every patient gets a fighting chance. I'll close with a quote from Abby, the girl I mentioned just before. She said this: "I refuse to be defined by the genetic mutations that have weakened the collagen holding my body together. My body will always be unstable and fragile, but my limitations do not determine who I am." I think that pretty much sums it up. For people with rare diseases, for their families, those limitations, as hard as some of them are not going to limit us if we think big. I'm confident that together we can accomplish some truly remarkable things. We'll develop therapies, treatments, and cures. We'll save lives, and we will not let limitations determine all that we can achieve when we work together. So thank you for bringing your voices to the Hill. I'm glad to be your partner in Washington, working across the aisle to help patients with rare diseases get the care they need. Keep up the great work.
Well, thank you very much to Senator Klobuchar.
Hello to all.
Well, thank you very much to Senator Klobuchar. To really inspiring comments. And I would also just encourage all of you to have a moment to look in the chat. We have a lot of very, very motivating and inspiring comments, including from Abby. So take a moment and please chime in and get involved. So let's move ahead with thanks again to our co-chairs. We are now going to hear from 4 speakers. We'll begin with James Valentine from Hyman Phelps. James, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, and just want to confirm you can hear me all right.
We can hear you well. Thank you, James.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. So it's such a pleasure to be with you all today, and I'd like to start my remarks with a quote. This is a quote from Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who we all know is the former FDA commissioner, and when in that role and addressing the rare disease community, he addressed the reality of drug development for rare conditions. He said, and I quote, "In many cases, developing a treatment for a rare disease can be especially hard and present unique challenges. Each success is the end of a long uphill climb. It requires the concerted efforts of stakeholders, including scientists, product developers, regulators, policymakers, and of course, the energy and organization of patient advocacy groups," end quote. Let me explain what Dr. Gottlieb was referring to. Since the enactment of the Orphan Drug Act in 1983, which this audience knows well, provides incentives for the development of drugs for small numbers of patients financially viable, there's been increased investment in the research and development of medical products, not only drugs and biologics, but also medical devices that are designed to prevent and treat rare diseases, also known as orphan conditions. This influx has created unique regulatory challenges for the Food and Drug Administration in providing regulatory oversight and in conducting the review of marketing applications, given that the development of products for these conditions present many unique challenges, the exact challenges Dr. Gottlieb was referring to. Understanding the natural history of a disease is an important element to serve as the foundation of a development program. However, because of the small numbers of patients affected and with clinical expertise being dispersed among a small number of referral centers, often the natural history of rare diseases is poorly described, which puts these programs at a disadvantage. Similarly, general knowledge about a rare disease's pathophysiology is incomplete, and despite this being invaluable to the successful development of a treatment. Little, if any, medical product development work has been done for most rare diseases, so there are not well-established assays to serve as biomarkers, nor are there well-characterized clinical outcome assessments to assess how a patient feels or functions. And furthermore, the ability to detect a clinically meaningful outcome requires understanding the rate of occurrence and variability of that outcome, both of which contribute to difficulties in powering a study in an already small population, not having that insight into that occurrence and variability. Standard trial designs are not optimized to obtain adequate safety and efficacy data when they're conducted in small numbers of patients, especially when the substantial phenotypic variability exists in so many rare disorders. And on top of all of these scientific issues, the affected patients can be challenging to identify, especially early in the course of their condition. They're generally geographically dispersed and are often children. Despite these challenges, there's no separate lower or lesser legal or regulatory standard for approval of orphan products. So researchers, product developers, and the FDA alike must confront these issues throughout all phases of development and employ creative approaches to product development and review. For example, rather than traditional clinical trials done in large populations, alternative clinical trial designs need to be considered. Also, the applicability of programs that afford some type of flexibility in regulatory review need to be explicitly considered. Things like single study approval authorities and the acceptance of surrogate endpoint approvals like accelerated approval. And while FDA has a track record of applying reasonable flexibility when it does approve orphan products, still a myriad of challenges in rare disease product development remain. And we cannot expect each individual center at FDA, office at FDA, or even review division at the agency to be experts in addressing each and every one of these challenges. This room for improvement is evidenced by the fact that after nearly 40 years of having a focus on orphan drug development, still nearly 95% of the known 7,000 to 10,000 rare diseases still have no FDA-approved therapy, and roughly the 5% that do, still a great unmet medical need exists. In my experience working within FDA and in private practice across the table from the agency, navigating these issues requires its own set of expertise in rare disease product development and review. Designing rare disease development programs is tricky, and we can't expect FDA officials to be able to, each of them to be able to have that expertise, even when the best clinical trials often still present difficult to interpret data because of all of the challenges that I mentioned. It takes experience dealing with these issues to get ahead of them, and that experience can take many years, if not decades, to develop. And this kind of experience is what gives regulators the ability to know where we can deviate from the traditional path that we have developed and applies to more common conditions, as well as how to make sure that FDA does not only avoid making false positive conclusions and approve drugs that don't work, but just as importantly, they need this expertise to ensure that they don't make false negative conclusions and not approve a drug that does. This experience exists, but it is inconsistently distributed within the current organizational structures across FDA's centers, offices, and review divisions. To further complicate matters, exciting new targeted therapies are changing the way we prevent, diagnose, and treat rare diseases. This further slices already rare diseases and limits the number of patients that can participate in trials, with some treatments that may work in only a few hundred or even a handful of people. Traditional regulatory processes that have become more complex, involving combinations of therapies, genomics, novel diagnostic tests, and precision medicine. And as a result of these, numerous parts of the regulatory system now for the first time need to cohesively work together. So as you'll hear from my co-panelists, our other speakers, as well as many of you know from your meeting with your own constituents throughout the years, but particularly in past rare disease weeks, the rare disease patient community has to face enough in their daily lives. We shouldn't let the added challenges of developing drugs that are designed to help make their lives a little bit better, a little bit easier, face, as Dr. Gottlieb put it, the continued presence of an uphill battle. And that will continue to be the case because products are being reviewed in a system that was not designed to handle these challenges. And again, you'll hear from my co-panelists stories of individual rare disease patient communities having to address these challenges as if they were the first rare disease to ever have to face them. But of course, we know they were not. There's an opportunity here to provide an integrated approach within FDA to allow a more proactive, consistent, and equitable clinical evaluation of drugs, biologics, and devices for rare diseases, and to use tools for appropriate regulatory flexibility. There's also an opportunity to provide more consistently engage with important patient stakeholders and include their voice in the review process. We know and have seen that these patients and their direct caregivers are experts in their condition and are a resource that has been largely in the past 40 years not taken advantage of. We are talking about maximizing the internal FDA expertise that already exists and the expertise within this robust, larger rare disease patient community to make the battle to develop drugs a little less long and a little less uphill. And now we will hear about proposals that would try to help do so. So thank you for your time and attention, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Ray.
James, thank you very much. Your comments are extremely thoughtful as always, and you've given us a list of very specific legislative opportunities, along with why they're so important at the human level and the importance of partnership. So thank you, James, we appreciate it. And we will come back to that in the questions and answers. Let me now hand over to Isabel Losada, who's founder and CEO of the Amyloidosis Research Consortium.
Thank you so much, and I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a patient with an ultra-rare fatal disease, AL amyloidosis. About 3,000 to 4,000 patients are diagnosed a year with amyloidosis, and it's a rapidly progressing blood disorder in which a rogue line of cells multiplies in the bone marrow, and instead of producing healthy cells to fight infections, they produce an abnormal protein that misfolds and deposits in any and all organs, and ultimately causing organ failure and death. It affects the kidneys, liver, heart, spleen, gastrointestinal tracts, and nervous systems. And for most, the heart is involved, and for those people with heart involvement, about 60% will die within 6 months of being diagnosed due to the advanced state of their disease. Like many rare diseases, it's challenging to diagnose, hard to treat, and even harder to develop treatments for. 25 years ago, I was diagnosed with AL amyloidosis. I was told I had 3 to 6 months to live, but I was told there was a drug that could save my life if they could keep me alive a bit longer. It would be a game changer. It was in development and it looked highly promising. Once approved, I was likely to be one of the first patients to be treated with it. That was 25 years ago, and this year, the first drug for AL amyloidosis was approved. I'm an outlier. I'm in 1% of patients who benefited from an experimental bone marrow transplant that arrested the disease, and over time, actually, the deposited proteins dissipated and my failing organs recovered. If that initial promising therapy was available, or if a bone marrow transplant was an option for most patients, or indeed if other therapies that cured the disease had been developed, I'd not be here today. I'd happily be continuing my career as an architect. Instead, I experienced firsthand the devastation of the promise of a cure and the dark days of gloom when no treatments were available or accessible. I saw firsthand how lack of collaboration, cross-stakeholder partnership, and regulatory barriers that set an unattainable bar for drug development in rare diseases leave patients devoid of treatment and hope. So after a slew of attempted, abandoned, and failed trials, and with the first drug approval for AL amyloidosis, we are a step closer to curing this disease, but we still have an awfully long way to go. In 2015, I set up the Amyloidosis Research Consortium, driven in part by my experience, but also that of tafamidis, a first-in-class drug for another type of amyloidosis. This drug failed to meet primary endpoints and gain approval, although it was approved in 40 other countries on its secondary endpoints. And the next generation of drug developers learned from this. They chose those secondary endpoints as their primaries and succeeded. But most rare diseases have no treatments, nor the luxury of multiple potential drugs in development. And in diseases like amyloidosis that are so rare and the course of the disease is not well studied, the challenge is immense, as James mentioned. It takes special people with a special interest in a disease at all levels of the drug development process, as well as patients, to break down the sizable barriers that stand in the way of rare disease drug development. We've been immensely fortunate in amyloidosis to first and foremost have the interest of Janet Woodcock, acting commissioner of the FDA, who herself misdiagnosed a patient with amyloidosis when she was in clinical practice, and that led to her developing special interest in the disease. Through her leadership and with Dr. Preston Dunman, who is the medical team leader in the Division of Cardiology and Nephrology at CDER in the FDA, my organization has formed a public-private partnership with the FDA. So recognizing the challenges that a multi-systemic rare disease does not fit well within a regulatory organizational framework that has siloed organ-specific review divisions, we created an ambitious plan and rigorous work streams. We formed 6 working groups with active members from 8 review divisions of the FDA. And in each working group, we have stakeholders, not just from regulatory, but academia, clinical researchers, patients, industry representatives, statisticians, both from within FDA and also externally. We also have engagement with the European Medicines Agency, EMA, and MHRA, the UK equivalent. Each of these groups is defining how to improve drug development within their organ area of expertise, and then coming back together to holistically approach drug development in this multi-systemic rare disease. The suggested endpoints are then tested through the combined analysis of all data from all studies that are being conducted in amyloidosis. The commitment it has taken from members of the amyloidosis community as well as FDA is nothing short of extraordinary, and I believe stands to really advance drug development in this disease. This is a remarkable example of the benefit of cross-division collaboration to improve and expedite drug development in an ultra-rare disease with a high unmet need. While the approach would be challenging to reproduce multiple times, an alternative approach, as mentioned earlier, would be to develop a rare disease center of excellence within the FDA. In 2017, FDA launched an oncology center of excellence to create a cross-center approach to reviewing oncology drugs. By breaking down silos and focusing on oncology-specific issues, this center of excellence has increased communication and collaboration. It's allowed for the creation of best practices to integrate the review of exciting new technologies. And this has resulted in the approval of dozens of new drugs and biologic applications, and that includes the first 2 cell-based gene therapies. Oncology is the first disease space to benefit from such a coordinated clinical review of products. Given the unique challenges of rare diseases, where standard trial designs are not optimized to obtain adequate safety and efficacy data from small numbers of patients, and especially with the substantial phenotypical variability that exists in many rare disorders, unique expertise is needed to advance the development and review of products for rare diseases. An intra-agency center of excellence for rare diseases would leverage successful elements of the oncology center of excellence and also adapt a model that's more appropriate to the unique challenges in rare product review. It would provide the necessary infrastructure to allow centers and offices across FDA to consistently and efficiently review novel products for these conditions. This, in my view, is a necessary departure from FDA's traditional orientation towards centers that focus on specific products, and instead would support an integrated approach to clinical evaluation of products for the treatment of rare diseases. As mentioned by Representative Bilirakis, the STAT Act, which is aimed at improving the development of and access to therapies for the rare disease community, needs to be supported. It will enact targeted, impactful, and attainable policy reform at the FDA to accelerate development of therapies for rare diseases. It will expand the existing authority to create a rare disease center of excellence. We should not have to rely on extraordinary champions to ensure drugs get developed and approved for a specific rare disease. Instead, we should ensure that there is a pathway for what are often complex, multi-systemic rare diseases to be evaluated in a way that is no more onerous than for common diseases. Thank you.
Isabel, thank you very much for sharing that inspiring, and not only sharing your 25 years of experience, but also sharing the value and the importance at a structural level, at an ecosystem level, that a Center for Rare Disease, a Center of Excellence could really make. We appreciate that, and I'm sure that is going to provoke a lot of thoughts on the way forward. Now let's move on, and please allow me to introduce Melissa Getz, our next speaker. Melissa is co-president of Living with FCS.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here and to be able to speak with all of you today. I'm excited to share with you what we've been working on, which is the HEART Act. And it's so nice to hear from Isabella and from James. I hear so much of what they're sharing, I really believe are things that the HEART Act is working to address through our own experience of with what we've been through with the FCS Foundation and with access to drugs and treatment for our rare disease. Currently, the FCS Foundation, Living with FCS, or familial chylomicronemia syndrome, we have no treatment available for our ultra-rare 1 in a million disease. And we are hoping that the HEART Act can help not just our rare disease state, but really every rare disease state that is facing this issue. So we've been working together with the Haystack Project, and their mission is to work with 90+ rare and ultra rare patient organizations, really looking at addressing issues of access to rare disease treatment. both through the FDA and through access, through reimbursement and issues like that. So we've been working with them, and they've been extremely helpful with us as we navigate this. So the HEART Act, and I'm happy to answer questions after this, just for the sake of time. I'm happy to answer questions of how we got here and how this all came about. You know, the short answer is that FCS, we had a drug that was in development. We were really hopeful for it. We saw that it helped our patients, and it gave them better quality of life and addressed a lot of the issues that they face, and it was keeping them out of the hospital. And then the drug, devastatingly, was not approved. It received a CRL in August of 2018, I believe. And we were just devastated and heartbroken, as I'm sure many of you can imagine we were. So as we started speaking with other rare disease groups, I'm sorry, I'm going to have you go back to the other slide. As we started speaking with other rare disease groups, we realized that this was not an FCS issue. This was a larger issue. And as we started talking with members on the Hill, we realized that they had heard this story from other groups as well. So what we're looking for, you know, we've worked with Congressman Tonko and Congressman McKinley. This is a really great bipartisan bill. We're so happy to have their support. We have been working very closely with them to make sure that things are being addressed. We, in 2020, it was introduced to the previous Congress, so just about a year ago. It was reintroduced in 2021. And this past May, there was a formal FDA technical assistance that was driven by the committee that was addressed, that we were excited about because it really showed the commitment that the committee had towards this bill. We hosted a roundtable this past May and June, and we are continuing to have conversations with staff about how to move forward with this bill. And we are hoping to get it introduced in the Senate soon. So really what we're looking for right now are co-sponsors to help support the passage of this bill and how important it is to us. So there's 5 tangible, immediately impactful improvements that we have for the HEART Act that came about from our experience, as well as discussing our experience with other rare disease groups. We're looking at advisory committee meetings to include a rare or ultra rare expert. So someone that can sit in on those meetings and really understand the rare disease perspective and understand things like small patient studies and why numbers look the way they look. And, you know, a rare disease trial, drug trial with, let's say 60 to 80 people, that's pretty big and that's pretty great. But in the grand scheme of looking at a drug, you know, you have committees that might not be used to looking at numbers like that and understanding what that means. So we're looking to include rare, ultra rare expert in all of those meetings. Division, experience, transparency, requiring an annual report to Congress on the number of rare disease applications by review division. And we've actually changed that as we've been working with the committee and looking at the technical assistance to change that to include filings as well, so that we can really see what committees have experience with looking at rare disease applications, how many of those are going through, what kind of questions they have, what the issues are, why those are getting approved or not going through, just to really have a good idea of where or what divisions might need more help in navigating these rare disease applications. Review division support, including the rare disease expertise through the entire drug evaluation process. And that means including patients from the beginning, the middle, and the end, not just at the beginning with some of these different listening sessions that patients can do. There's certainly opportunities for patients to share their rare disease story, but we believe that that needs to be happening throughout the entire process, so that as questions come up through the filing, while data is being looked at, that those questions can be presented to patients as well, or people who have experience living with the rare disease, so that they can address them. REMS, including patient input and patient-related risk evaluation and mitigation strategy provisions. looking at, rare disease patients, I think, have a very different risk evaluation than maybe your general population. What rare disease patients are living with is different. And they're willing, I think, to take on a little bit more risk to their benefit, and they're going to weigh those things differently, and that should be taken into consideration. And finally, the EU experience data. One of the things that was frustrating for us was that about a year later, the drug that was not approved in the US was approved in Europe, meaning that our counterparts in Europe have access to a treatment that helps, while those of us living in the United States do not have access to that treatment. So what we're hoping for is that that can just be included as data, and that the FDA can use that to look at how that drug is impacting those patients, raise those sample study sizes, and be considered as they look at approving drugs here in the United States. So what we learned that the FC, we got the ball rolling, sharing our experience with Haystack. The bipartisan Rare Caucus encouraged legislative route. They encouraged us to put this bill together, just from hearing similar stories from rare disease patients that they were meeting with. We have put together what we think is very practical, but immediately impactful, and can really help benefit rare disease patients as they navigate the rare disease drug approval process. PFDD meetings are important and great, but are insufficient. We really need patient involvement throughout the entire process. We need to understand what the experience across divisions is and how we can help support the FDA with rare disease drug applications and understanding the rare disease experience. Go to the next slide. Committee staff has been very receptive and about the HEART Act, about the FDA, and about how this will impact, and working with us to find ways to make the bill something that can really be impactful. They understand that this is not an unreasonable ask, or just, the FCS Foundation being upset about one drug that wasn't approved, but really about seeing a system that can be better and can be more supportive for all rare disease groups. So if you are interested in supporting the HEART Act as a co-sponsor, please ask if you would like to meet a patient in your state or district. You can email the Haystack Project or myself. My email address is there. If you would like to support the HEART Act, you can go to our website, and we have a tab for the HEART Act where you can write a letter to your congressperson saying why the HEART Act is important to you and needs your support.
Great, Melissa, thank you very much. That was inspiring, and we really appreciate you outlining the HEART Act and the difference that it could make, along with all of the pieces that I think are really important. So with that, just to keep us moving on, we're going to move on to our next speaker, Joanna Johnson, who is a board member at the Parent Project for Muscular Dystrophy. Joanna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ray. And again, I just want to thank also Isabella and Melissa for their stories. We have a lot in common, and it's so important that the rare disease community comes together so that progress continues to be made. Also, just wanted to say thank you to the Every Life Foundation and the Congressional Rare Disease Caucus for giving me the opportunity to speak today. I have two sons with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. My oldest is 17, and my other son, Henry, is 15. The photo on the left is obviously before diagnosis. And my husband and I were just very happy parents of two boys. I had visions of the future for my sons and my family, and really that all came crashing down around me when I learned that they had a progressive fatal muscle wasting disease. And at that point, Duchenne became my whole world. I don't have any other children. It consumes every aspect of my family life. They're both non-ambulatory now and have limited upper arm function. So they need pretty much assistance with the most simple of daily tasks. However, it's not all bad, and we've carved out a very nice, happy life for ourselves. And the photo on the right shows me as a smiling band mom. I'm really proud of all they've accomplished despite facing challenges that their peers cannot even imagine. Rare disease is hard. I think that every person on this call can agree upon that fact. Clinical trials in rare disease highlight that challenge all too well. You're a part of a small patient population. Little is understood about disease variability, and these clinical trials are relatively new. My sons were part of the new generation of clinical trials for Duchenne in the early 2000s. It's often been said about this trial that the drug company was literally building the plane while in flight. Endpoints were chosen based on information that they had at the time. Trial design seemed appropriate until you're talking about taking young boys traveling on a monthly basis, spending 2 days away from home, undergoing tests. And the data that is gathered is really only a small snapshot of what benefits the drug might provide. As caregivers and patients living the disease day to day, benefit may manifest itself in many more ways that are not captured in a clinical trial. I experienced this firsthand. Elliot began the trial at age 5, and before the trial, he would spider crawl up the stairs, and after being on drug, he walked freely up the stairs without even needing to hold onto the railing. Elliot was unable to jump before the trial. Once on drug, he gained that ability. He lost his Gowers maneuver, which is basically losing your hands to walk yourself up, and was able to get up the floor easily. Making these gains was unheard of in Duchenne. And unfortunately, many of these things that we found meaningful weren't even being collected in the trial. If you could go to the next slide, please. For years, rare disease advocacy organizations like EveryLife and Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy have understood the need for FDA to consider this type of information about the patient experience and weigh it against the potential benefits and risks of a new therapy. Over the years, through advocacy and legislation, advocates, Congress, and the FDA have made considerable progress in driving forward policies and procedures to ensure that patient perspectives are considered by FDA reviewers in a more structured and transparent manner. Through PDUFA and 21st Century Cures, it became required for the FDA to incorporate patient perspectives into their decision-making process and to consider relevant patient experience data. Next slide, please. And thanks to 21st Century Cures and a provisions championed by the Duchenne community and many on the line today, we now know whether or not reviewers even have access to this type of data at the time of review. But today, a huge gap exists in this process, and we still don't understand exactly how patient experience data is weighed and considered by FDA, and when they evaluate the potential benefits and risks of a new therapy. Next slide, please. To address this gap, Senators Roger Wicker and Senator Amy Klobuchar have introduced S373, the Better Empowerment Now to Enhance Framework and Improve Treatments, or the BENEFIT Act. And this legislation would amend the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to ensure that patient experience, patient-focused drug development, and relative data, including information developed by a product sponsor or a third party, such as a patient advocacy organization, be considered as part of the benefit risk assessment, the FDA's signature tool for evaluating benefit risk for new therapies. Next slide, please. This action will send an important signal to all stakeholders that patient experience and patient-focused drug development data will be fully incorporated into the agency's review process and will encourage such entities to develop scientifically rigorous and meaningful tools and data. The BENEFIT Act will also enhance an important transparency and accountability provision included in the 21st Century Cures Act by requiring the FDA to say how much patient experience, and PFDD data was considered within the benefit risk assessment for any approved therapies. This will provide additional learnings to all stakeholders, particularly patients, and help further refine and develop such tools going forward. The field of patient engagement in drug development continues to flourish thanks to continued interests and focus by Congress. The BENEFIT Act will continue this evolution by filling a sizable gap by ensuring such data is fully considered as part of the FDA's risk-benefit assessment for any new products. The rare disease community is very grateful to Senators Wicker and Klobuchar for introducing S.373. We are currently working with rare disease champions in the House right now to secure a House companion bill. Next slide, please. So 14 years ago on June 1st, my oldest son was diagnosed. A month later, on July 7th, my younger son's diagnosis was confirmed. And it truly was the very darkest day of my life, but I was given a ray of hope, a clinical trial. It was like I got the get out of jail free card. My boys were going to be the first generation of boys to beat this disease. I was naive in thinking it would be that easy. The community has learned a lot since that trial, and we have several drug approvals to show our progress. But until we have a clear understanding of why drugs fail and what information is valued and included in the FDA review process, our progress will be slow at best. Elliot and Henry do not have the luxury of time, waiting for each drug company to reinvent the wheel, guessing as to what information the patient provides is meaningful in the drug approval process. Patient-focused drug development wasn't even a term when my boys first entered their clinical trial. And we have made so much progress in ensuring patients and caregivers have their rightful seat at the drug development table, but more must be done. We need more clarity in the decision-making process, and that begins with a modest change to the benefit risk framework to include information about how FDA incorporates patient experience data. Transparency is what we need in order to learn and move the field of patient-focused drug development forward. Every child diagnosed with a rare disease and their family deserves nothing less. Thank you so much.
Joanna, thank you very much. Inspiring comments, and thank you for sharing not only your personal experience with Elliot and Henry, but also the ray of hope and all of the work that you and PPMD have done with the BENEFIT Act. I think to just put all these comments into perspective, we've heard a little bit about many different ways of coming together to attack the same problem. James laid out a framework, and we've heard about the importance of a COE from Isabel. We've heard about the HEART Act from Melissa. We've heard about the BENEFIT Act from Joanna. And then we've heard strong support from all of our caucus co-chairs. So that's why this is a moment filled with promise. And I hope that we can all come together to realize that promise. That this evening, we have a very special opportunity to watch a screening of a rare disease documentary, A Mystery to Me. And for those of you that haven't seen that, I am sure that that is going to be a moving experience. With that, I will wrap up our briefing for today, and let me just take the opportunity to again say thank you to all of our sponsors, to all of our co-chairs, in person, by video, sending their good wishes through the airwaves, and very importantly to all of our speakers, James, Isabel, Melissa, Joanna. Thank you for retransmitting your courage and the actions that you're taking to shape a way forward. I know that there are thousands of people, including me, listening, who want to join arms with you and make a better future. So thank you, and I hope that you have a terrific week. On behalf of the Every Life Foundation, we appreciate your partnership and look forward to many more positive steps.